Hello and welcome to the Warhammer preview, coming live to you from Adepticon 2023. I am Eddie and I'm joined today by Mike, and we have got so much cool Warhammer to show you.
I am so excited to share it again, and it has been such an energizing evening. Adepticon is one of those founding events of the independent scene. It's one of the largest Warhammer events in the world. It is run by a passionate group of volunteers and folks who just love everything that is Warhammer. We get to see over 1,000 of them in the room here and share everything we're about to go through with everyone on the line. I'm buzzing at the chance to get to do it again.
It was really, really fun. So we've just had the preview for the people at the event. We had, as you say, 1,000 people, 1,000 Warhammer fans. 1,100 and some other people kind of around the edges. Really, really cool. Some awesome stuff we get to show off. And we get to show you guys who are watching along on the stream all that stuff in just a few minutes. I can see there's about 30,000 of you currently tuned in.
Given the fact that it's like 3 a.m. in some of our core demographic here for this show.
Absolutely, yeah. So do let us know where you're tuning in from, guys. It's about, I think, 3 or 4 in the morning over in the UK. It's still pretty late over here in the US as well.
It's pretty late in the US. We're here at Central Time. It's already past 10. Eddie here probably still getting over the jet lag. You were in the UK just yesterday.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we had an interesting flight over. It was not without incident, but it's all good. We're here now.
Many cities on your way to Chicago.
Yeah, well, I can already see in the chat we've got loads of people. It's going flying by so fast. We've got the UK. There's some people, loads of the US, Denmark, Europe, China, all sorts of places. So the Shire I see in there as well. So thanks for tuning in, guys. We've got a really, really cool show. We've got loads of really fun stuff. Yeah, I'm excited to share it. If you guys have got any theories or any things you're particularly looking forward to seeing, let us know in the chat. Some of them might come true.
Indeed, and see what you can get out of us in the chat, because there's all sorts of things we can talk about over the next bit here.
Yeah, we might be able to answer some questions. The chat is going so fast at the moment.
It's just wild guesses.
I might not be able to see your question, but we'll do our best. If any kind of repeat questions are popping up, we might be able to cover them as well. So, Mike, before we dive in, Adepticon obviously a huge part of the event scene,
an inspirational part of the scene, frankly.
For Warhammer, you are Mr. Events for Warhammer.
I am.
So tell us what Adepticon means to you.
Well, so all of us who come to Adepticon, and I've been here many times, I came here many times before I joined Games Workshop, but it really inspired me into the sort of event side of the hobby. It's inspired me to run events of my own. It inspired me in how I've approached Warhammer when it comes to engaging with the community in person. And events like this are really a representation of the community itself, and the community is really Warhammer. Without the community, Warhammer is nothing, and without Warhammer, we wouldn't be lucky enough to have this community, and it's really writ large here at an event like Adepticon. If you've never had a chance to go, I recommend it. It doesn't matter where you are. There are people who come from all over the world to attend, and it's sort of the godfather of the independent event scene. Adepticon existed before them all, and so it's been great to see it grow over the years, and I think this is the 20th year that they've been doing it, the 18th Adepticon. And my ears are ringing from the enthusiasm and the joy that was here in the room, and it was palpable from the moment that folks started to walk in. I really can't do it justice by sharing about it verbally. I have to encourage folks, take a look at the coverage over the next few weeks on Warcom as we post the various different images and whatnot. And if you've never made the journey yourselves to the mecca that is Adepticon, make it one year. Come say hi to us. Eddie and I will be on stage, I'm sure, year in, year out, and telling you all about the latest reveals. And I think it's getting close to the time that we should probably...
I think we should probably show them some stuff. So all the good people have tuned in. They want. It's stupid o'clock in the morning some places, so we should probably let them see some cool things. We've got a pretty good one to open, so should we roll the first video?
I suppose.
Co jest pierwsze? Dobra, już chciałem sprawdzić poziomy audio, ale niech będzie.
The state of the galaxy, the Dark Angels, the Arcs of Omen series has led to the break.
Morbius i Killteam? Dobra, wiem.
Abaddon sent out the Arcs of Omen, Vashtor the Archifane is now at large, and Angron is on a rampage, and there's perhaps one character in the entire galaxy who could stand against Angron. That's the line.
Lionel Johnson is the Primarch of the Dark Angels, formerly the Dark Angels Legion, and now is the returned Primarch of the Dark Angels chapter. Returning Primarchs are a big deal. The return of Rabute Gilliman, that was an era-defining moment for the inhabitants of the 41st millennium.
Starzał chłopak.
First millennium. It doesn't happen very often, and this is the second opportunity in my lifetime, certainly, to see a living Primarch return.
He's been deep in the rock for thousands of years. All is lost to chaos. But this is where the lion appears. And this is where he makes his stand as a light in the dark, as a knight standing alone.
He grew up as a feral youth on a forested world full of monsters, and then taken in by knights after he'd spent years hunting down creatures of chaos. And that's pretty much what he's
Szczerze,
come
tak?
back to doing. He's found half of the galaxy completely subsumed by darkness, warp storms, chaotic beasts, so he's just set back to work. He is going to reunite, you'd imagine, with the Dark Angels chapter, and woe betide anybody who finds themselves on the other side of the battlefield from them.
Oj, ale szczerze, się zestarzał chłopak.
So, the Lion has returned. A brand new Primarch has returned to Warhammer 40,000 to the 41st millennium. Some of you predicted it. Some of saw it coming.
Just a few.
Just a few, you know.
And is he brand new or is he brand old? I can't tell. He's been around.
So he is pretty old. So we saw some of the people in the chat there commenting that he looks quite old. He is 10,000 years old.
He is. He hasn't been sitting comfortably in stasis for 10,000 years.
Yeah, it's probably on like a stone slab as well. So
it doesn't sound very comfortable, actually. I don't want to talk about that, Eddie, at this point in my life.
Fair enough. Well, so let's have a look at the miniature then. So we've got some shots of it. Absolutely phenomenal miniature. Early contender, I think, for miniature of the year. One of the most anticipated Warhammer models I think we've ever had the pleasure to reveal on one of our live streams. Every inch of this model is just dripping with detail and iconography and just the raw, cool, gothic aesthetic of the Dark Angels.
It's been difficult for me to even fathom how we got to the point that it was designed in the way that it is, because it's stunning. And nothing that I could have expected was actually fulfilled with it, because it was so much better than what I was imagining. And I got to tell you, it was one of the better kept secrets of the studio. I could not see it myself until I think, a couple days ago. So it's been amazing to see the community get excited and make all the wild calls and whatnot. And of course, there was a video of a lion earlier today. Yeah,
could have been about anything. Who knows? So loads of really lovely details to talk about on this miniature. So, we'll go through some of the highlights. So he's got a sword. He's got a brand new sword. So
he does seem to have
one. This is not the Lion sword. The Lion sword is still with Cypher around the galaxy somewhere. At some point, maybe they'll meet again, but it's not this day. But he has another blade which is more than capable of cleaving monsters in half with. He's accompanied by two Watchers in the Dark. These are the kind of shadowy forms that follow key Dark Angels characters around, and there is no more significant character than the Lion himself. And they kind of whisper to him in the darkness and hints about where he might best put his service to the Emperor and defeat the forces of chaos.
Well, he's also got a shield there, Eddie, it looks like.
He does. He is carrying the Emperor's shield. So that is the glorious golden Oromite shield carried by the Emperor and now carried by his son in much the same way that Guilliman wields the Emperor's sword. The Emperor possibly gifted or maybe inherited the shield of the Emperor. So when he's fighting against the horrors of the galaxy, he can use the Emperor's shield to deflect the deadly blows that might even lay someone like him low. Other details on him there, you can see that the details on his armor are effectively scaled up, more ornate, elaborate versions of Space Marine power armor. So he's definitely still fundamentally a Space Marine, right? He's a leader of a Space Marine Legion, and all the iconography of the Dark Angels in some capacity is kind of incorporated into his armor.
I actually think it's fascinating with the paint job as well, that he's clearly got that green element of the Dark Angels, but there's sort of that original sort of darker hue to the main armor plates as well going on in the way that it's been put together.
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly interpret that armor as being black armor with a slightly green tinge to it. That's pretty cool. Obviously, the green of the Dark Angels comes from the Forests of Caliban. That's where that green color scheme comes from. And the black was kind of their original First Legion color. So the green of the Dark Angels Legion was incorporated when the Lion joined, basically. So it's a nice little touch that he's kind of got some of that hue into the paint scheme. I think we've got another shot of some more close-ups. So this might be my favourite thing about this. It's not my favourite thing about it. There's so much cool stuff. But one of the cool things about it is that there are 4 different head options for the Lion. So you can sort of choose how you want your Lion to represent on the battlefield. So you can have your unhelmeted head, so he's kind of there as the general of the forces, bellowing commands to his legion.
Ta jest spoko, nie pasuje do
You can
Liona.
have the kind of hooded option,
też.
either with helmet or
Myślę,
without.
że więcej osób
To
będzie
have a much
w
more
tej
mysterious
formie.
kind of wandering knight errant sort of vibe.
It'll be the secrets of the dark
Yeah,
ages.
Yeah,
taki
or
fajny.
you can go kind
Ale
of
taki trochę
full-on
inny vibe
lion
niż
helm and
wyobrażam
have
sobie Liona.
the winged helmet that's become synonymous with the Dark
Dobra, mam
Angels over the
pytanie.
years.
To jest ten sam hełm.
The kind of
Gdzie
absolute
skrzydła?
icon of the Dark Angels writ in the helmet of the of their Primarch. So some really cool options. And the Lion is a complicated character.
No właśnie,
right?
tak.
So he's
Trzeci
got
za
a
bardzo
really interesting
mi
relationship with the
pachnie
Imperium, with his
tym
brothers, with his own chapter,
Chaplinem, tak Templarsów.
with
Nie pamiętam jak się nazywa.
his commanders under him. So he
Nie będzie
is this
pasuje
kind of
dwójka i czwórka.
multifaceted,
A
interesting
dwójka nie
personality.
Lionowa,
You can
czwórka
kind of choose which of those
jako
you like
Lion.
and which one you associate
druga
with.
najlepsza głowa.
Make the model to fit.
You're already hinting at a few things about him. There are questions aplenty that even I have about the Arcs of Omen book itself. What is going on with the Lion in the current?
Yes, so this model comes out alongside Arcs of Omen Book
Czyli
5,
szybko.
which is the culmination of the Arcs of Omen series. The book is called Arcs of Omen The Lion, and it will chronicle the finale of the story of the Arcs of Omen, which will see a huge showdown effectively between the forces of Chaos and the forces of the Imperium.
No raczej
On
wiem jak się
the
skończy.
Imperial side you will have the
O,
Lion
skalę.
alongside
No tak mogliby
some of the Dark Angels.
No zgaduję, że on będzie trochę
and some
niższy
of their
niż Gulliman
successors,
przez to, na
and
czym
you'll have Dante,
przez to jak Gulliman
and you'll
stoi.
have some Blood Angels, so some of
Dobra.
the angels, basically, the angels of darkness will stand against the forces of chaos. On the chaos side, you've got Abaddon, you've got Vashtor, you've got Angron, so it's going to be a huge showdown, effectively. So on the screen right now, you can see kind of how the Lion scales up against some of the other key models that you'll see him alongside. So they're against an Intercessor, so you can see quite a lot bigger than a standard Space Marine. And against Reboot Gulliman, he's the same scale. So he is a Primarch, they are brothers. Neither of them was known to be particularly larger than their brothers, so they are pretty much the same size. They're standard Primarch.
Everyday run-of-the-mill Primarch that you
Absolutely.
see around the
Well,
corner on
he's
usual
original
Saturday
and best,
mornings.
some would say, for the Lion.
Indeed, it's true. His rock looks a little less tactical.
If anyone is going to stand on a rock, it's going to be the Lion.
It does seem like what he does as a standard approach.
It's kind of his
life.
jam, right?
Eddie, never without a good pun when it's needed.
So this is the artwork that comes on the cover of Arcs of Omen Book 5, and you get a kind of close-up on the Lion there. You can see that he has aged, basically. So as far as the narrative, the timeline is concerned, Gulliman has been in stasis for most of the last 10,000 years. So when he comes out, fresh-faced, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, maybe only a few centuries old. The Lion has literally been alive for all 10,000 years. So that's what a Primarch looks like.
Just a very long nap.
It's a really, really long cat nap.
To w teorii nie powinien się postarzeć aż
It's
tak.
one of the things we saw people commenting on. He looks older, and the reality is, for those that didn't pick it up earlier, he is indeed quite a bit older.
He's pretty old. Yeah, he's pretty old. But he does that kind of like ancient, venerable veteran knight errant sort of thing. So you can imagine that kind of character. And this is what happens in the Arcs of Omen, basically, is that he is wandering through the Imperium Nihilus, taking on monster hunting, basically, like picking up where he left off when he was a Knight of Caliban.
His primary calling.
Yeah, wandering out into the dark forests to take down the monsters that haunt the darkness.
And we saw that in his quote, his focus being on teaching them to fear the darkness in which they dwell.
Yeah. Here he is alongside a Dark Angel's army. You can kind of see how he scales versus some of the other units. So, you know, he's looks pretty cool next to Dreadnoughts and Intercessor units and tanks.
To jest też, wszystko to jest
and his
generic, no to jest
colour scheme
nowe.
obviously kind of has a little bit of all of the bits of the Dark
nic
Angel
nie
series.
mamy.
If you want to paint him, you can certainly add some bone colour, some black colour, some green, and have him as the absolute centerpiece of a Dark Angel.
Już mówię o jaki cel mi chodzi, tylko jeszcze raz sobie patrzę.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a painter's treat. It's going to be a very, very cool model to paint up. There are some shots from Arcs of Omen Book 5. So we can see here the Dark Angels and the Blood Angels fighting against the forces of, first of Chaos, but Demons of Nurgle in this instance. One of the things that... There's some really, really cool stories in the last episode of the Arcs of Omen. So I don't want to spoil it, because it's got some absolute huge twists and turns. Even for those who've followed Warhammer 40,000 for a long time, there's some really nice payoffs to some very, very long-running arcs.
Jaki Azrael będzie miał hełm?
Tell them more about it, because Eddie's given me a bit of a rundown, and it's been hard for me to not just want to kibitz about it with every single Warhammer fan that I can come across.
Teraz powiem, o co mi chodzi z tym setem. Jest książka, w której Pertura, bo razem z jednym Space Marinesem są uwięzieni w przestrzeni przy pewnym biegu czasu. Tylko okej, tu może jakaś jest trochę racji. Space Marines się zrobił generalnie w starca. Pertura, bo dosłownie nic się nie wydarzyło.
The last thing, though, to say about this is that in the Arx Foeman Book 5, the Lion will fight Angron. So we have a situation, 2 brand new miniatures, 2 new Primarchs, both returned to the 41st millennium. They will have a showdown in Book 5 of the Arx of Omen.
I'm ordering this poster. Or behind me.
If you if you are a Lion fan or a Angron fan, please let us know in the chat who you will be rooting for in that particular battle.
Can we do a poll there in the chat?
I mean, maybe.
We might be able to do a poll. Who should win or who will win?
Who will win?
Angron.
Nieważne kto wygra, Angron przeżyje, niestety.
Yeah, you can guess what you want.
Dobra, czyli wiemy, że Lion wygra.
There's more to talk about.
Lion jest śmiertelny.
I think we told everyone here it was the biggest Warhammer preview we'd ever
Dobrze
done.
wiemy.
I think
in terms of the amount of stuff.
In terms of the amount of stuff, it would be an injustice if we didn't serve the same treatment.
So we are leaving 41st Millennium for a little bit, and we are going to jump into the mortal. Oh, it's Heresy first. So we're going to jump to the Horus Heresy.
Dobra, w takim razie takie przerwa techniczna, koło obchodzi Herezję Horusa.
I'm Andy Hall. I work on the Horus Heresy team in the Warhammer studio.
To jest Andy, ale jak może nazwisko Andy?
The setting for the Siege of Cathonia book is the planet of Cathonia itself, which is the homeworld of the Sons of Horus. It's actually the homeworld of the Warmaster Horus. As the Warmaster's fleets were advancing on Terra, a small detachment, calling themselves the True Sons of Cathonia, decide to peel away from the fleets and retake Cathonia in the interests of the honour of their culture. So the book opens up with a really big, extensive narrative of the actual Cathonia campaign itself. Then we go into a section that sums up what all of the big factions in the Horus Heresy are doing at this point in the war. We also have some new core scenarios for the game. So if you wish to play through the events described in the narrative, you've got some special scenarios that are themed around the Siege of Cathonia. We gave people a basic way of doing Zone Mortalis games in White Dwarf when the new edition came out, and this takes that and expands it into a full system. So full Zone Mortalis scenarios system in this book. It's also got a really interesting section on Space Marine Inductii. We've got a new type of consul, which is called a Decorian. We have the Infernus Abomination. And then the last thing in the book, there's a number of special characters and special models that you can take. There's the two main leaders, the two main special characters, Garrus, Evander for the Imperial Fists and Varanasha Hadden for the Sons of Horus. We've got models coming out for those, rules for them in here. This is the first of the campaigns of the Age of Darkness series, and we intend to keep going with these. One really important thing to say about this book is it's designed to appeal to all Horus Heresy players. It's also telling a really important part of the overall story.
No tak, ale w teorii, jak wszystkie inne kampanie Herezji Horusa, tu będą bardzo ograniczone regiony grają. Ciszę. Szczerze wolę mieć swoje audio niż audio streamu. Bo to też będę w stanie odzyskać ewentualnie. Powiedzcie mi tak, czy przynajmniej cokolwiek słychać z nich, jak ja mówię.
Yeah, so one of the things that was a huge hit with the first edition of the Horus Heresy were the black books. That was basically the main way that you engaged with the game, and they had loads of
tak, ale właśnie Herezja Horusa miała ten problem, stara herezja, że no to świetnie, że czarne książki miały za dużo zasad jednostek. Generalnie to były książki, one chyba kosztowały same z 200, jeśli nie 300 zł w dniu premiery. No i generalnie nawet jak się nie chciało grać Legionem opisywanym w tej książce, to wypadało mieć tą książkę, tam, może akurat są zasady dla jakiegoś pojedynczego oddziału, którego mogą grać wszystkie Legiony. Jak na przykład tutaj, Zone Mortalis jest w teorii opisywany. Mimo, że to jest kampania Synowie Horusa kontra głównie Lion, chyba, z tego co kojarzę. No bo on jest tam na tym niszczeniu pleców.
Horus's homeworld on Chthonię itself, and the characters
that
lead those battles will be getting new miniatures alongside lots of other new miniatures that
niedługo przed oblężeniem.
campaign books herald. So it's a really exciting time for the Horus Heresy. It's like the next step. We've had the edition.
Takim Persa oblężeniem.
We've had the kind of base level, and now this is diving into the detail.
It's pretty exciting to hear Andy talk about it as well. Even when he's not on a recording, there's a certain driving passion that exists there for Warhammer and for the brand and for the game that it is sort of hard to rival, and it's magical to see amongst the folks who are actually designing and building the product. And also to hear him talk about it as inside of our regular meetings, a historical wargame in a sense, and that we view the Heresy itself as a historical moment in the history of Warhammer.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting thing about the Horus Heresy, which is that when people get really into it, they want like authenticity, right? So like people tend to go, I want this bit of the lore. I read this story, it was really cool. I want the faction, the specific company or chapter that took part in that battle, and these campaign books basically go, here is a bunch of really cool stuff that happened, and each of those moments, each of those battles gives you an opportunity to kind of go, that chapter was cool, I want that drop force, or I want that assault company, or this one. Yeah.
Well, which would you be? Would you be a son of Horus or an Imperial Fist in this particular
wait, so in this one,
I think Imperial Fist mówią, że są.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Imperial Fist. Also, there's sort of like a little bit of a flex when you're painting a beautiful yellow force,
I mean, it is Horus's Heresy, right? It's his game. So
it's his game, so he has enough spotlight. We can root for
that's fair.
So one of the other things too is if you ever happen to see some photos, if you're ever at one of the events we're at, we actually have a 64 square foot Horus Heresy Massacre battlefield with hundreds, if not 1,000, I think at this point, miniatures, recreating the whole experience and some of the like scene for scene, shot for shot pieces of cover art from the Heresy. So I'm kind of a big old Heresy historical nerd myself.
Wiem, chicken. To jest, szczerze, to jest głowa Dorna z TS-a. Nie będę ukrywał.
So one of the things that these books do is they give you a bit more of the kind of rich tapestry of the Heresy, and what we know is that some of the legions and chapters didn't fall completely, or they had loyalist elements in them. So one of the things that's quite interesting in this book is that you get some loyalist elements of the Thousand Sons.
Nie, bo ona nie jest zła, tylko nie pasuje mi do Liona. Mi osobiście.
So, really?
Yeah. So I'm going to pick them. So I like the Thousand Sons. They're like one of my choices.
You're a fan of the small contingent of loyalist Thousand Sons.
That's exactly it. I'm a fan of those.
That's a deep cut, one that's also quite a sneak peek for those who are paying attention.
Cool. Okay, so that's Horus Heresy. Really cool. This book is going to be accompanied by loads and loads of new stuff. Dome Mortalis rules, brand new miniatures, all sorts of cool things. We are now going to jump to the Mortal Realms.
Dobra, przerwa techniczna.
It's a good cut to jump from the immortal legions of the Space Marines, many of whom die constantly in the Horus Heresy.
Nikogo to nie obchodzi.
Flawless segue.
Dobra, no śmiesznie te zawrosy wyglądają. To jest jakiś kampania, jakiś imienny, znaczy może nie imienny, ale dowódca. No i zawróci na raptorach. Agradon Lancets. Cool. No to już chyba jest cały range w teorii. To są Zaurusy? Nie, no Tanki. No, tak trochę... Warspound. Jeszcze mocniejsi. Nie wiem, czy mi się podoba, ale w sumie... No tak, to są szczerze... Takie ciekawe. Wiele rzeczy można z tym zrobić. Dobra. Nie, o Jezu. Nieprzygotowany jestem na to.
So that is the rest of the Seraphon forces. We'd always seen some new models on their way at some previous previews, but this is the rest of the range, and effectively the Seraphon have now been fleshed out to be one of the best looking
myślałem, że...
I feel like a 12-year-old again. I want to name all of them.
Szkoda, bo to może być bardzo mały oddział potencjalnie, a szkoda.
Excited about this. As someone who's relatively new to Age of Sigmar, this is the army that got me into it.
To jest lepszy widok moim zdaniem.
And I am over the moon excited
about
what
fajna. Mamy tutaj liczne modele, nic więcej.
Forgetting that part, I'm just excited to collect them personally.
Well, so Lizardmen was my first army when I started playing Warhammer.
Really?
Yeah.
To pytanie, jak dużo modele to chodzi? To chodzi w trójkach? Bo jeśli tak, no to siepacko, bo sztandari i bedniarza.
Agradon Lancer unit you can see on screen at the moment. This effectively replaces the Cold One Riders that we currently have in the Lizardman range. They are significantly bigger than the current heavy cavalry of the Seraphon. This is a very, very hard-hitting unit. They are elite Saurus riding on the back of fairly large.
No wiem, no. Ależ oni pewnie mają po prostu mieli drugą falę, jak Wotani.
Grinding force in close combat.
Are they reptilian or are they more like avian?
I mean, so that they are effectively the dreams of frogs from another dimension. So I think the evolutionary tree probably doesn't really apply.
That's a really good point. Dinosaur monster heroes from space.
Absolutely, but the models are incredible. I think if you are a painter, the Seraphon have leaped up the list of armies that would be a treat, because not only do you get to play with incredible color schemes for them, but the new miniatures are so detailed and so wonderful. This is an alternate color scheme for the Agrodon Lancer. There's some really, really nice new color schemes actually.
Mam nadzieję, że mogę dać tarcz i
one of the things that the studio have basically done is gone, you can paint them in much more varied colors. We've shown that in much more varied ways than maybe the last few battle tomes have.
Nie wystarczy.
In the mortal realms, effectively, is that the Seraphon are becoming one with the realm they're in. So if they're in the realm of fire, they get like a brimstone.
To jest ciekawe, czy to jest dowódca, czy to jest sierżant oddziału. Dzisiaj bohater czy sierżant.
So if you want to kind of make your Seraphon your own and place them somewhere in the mortal realms and really ground them, you can, or you can kind of lean into their classic aesthetic. And what you see here actually is a throwback with that color scheme to a very old concept.
Szczerze, One Page Rule'owi bardzo dobrze moim zdaniem otworzyli Serafonów, więc akurat tutaj nie za bardzo mnie ciągnie do tego.
One of the old ones had intervened and gone, this person is marked for greatness, so they would be
One Page Rules mają bardzo ładne jaszczurki. I też mają kosmiczne jaszczurki, to są fajne.
And that's what you're seeing there in the Scar Veteran on Agrodon.
Jaszczurki muszą być fajne. One też nie są aż tak detaliczne, dziwne jak One Page Rule'owe, więc to się maluje pewnie znowu godzina na każdego. No ja myślałem, żeby właśnie zrobić ten właśnie dużo rzeczy wykorzystać do Serafonów, do armii orków, takich Snakebytesów. Croxigor, jakoś ten Croxigor tak znają z nazwy. No, myślałem, że to wyciszyłem.
Is that the age of the beast, the coming of Kragnos, has effectively shaken the foundations of the Seraphon.
Pilnuję.
The new kind of wave of bestial energy has woken up all these kind of ancient eggs that were in different pockets of the ziggurats.
Sleepy dinos.
Yeah, and they were like, oh, I didn't know we had all these eggs. They've woken up. On screen at the moment, there's a couple of units of Croxigor. There is one new Croxigor kit coming, and it makes two different units. You can make your standard Croxigor, which are still hulking, enormous reptilian killers, but you can make this brand new unit, which are called Croxigor Warspawned, and these are built and live for battle. So, whereas a normal Croxigor in times of peace might help the skinks kind of construct pyramids or fashion things or move heavy loads around, these guys want none of that. They are just angry, massive crocodiles that just want to rip into enemy units.
O, ale paskudztwa. Dawniej to były. Ale kwadratowe, te są lepsze.
They're sort of heroic, so they're about as chaotic and destructive as you can be while still being on team order.
Absolutely. Still good guys.
And here's a shot of the whole Seraphon range, kind of as it all comes together, and you get a sense now of all those new units that we've seen and how they kind of come together to make just an incredible looking faction. So everything about the Seraphon, every new kit,
Warpspawni są ogromni. Wielkość ogryna prawdopodobnie. Bardzo fajne. Znowu, to są bardzo fajne bitsy do jakiejś ciekawej konwersji może. Tylko pytanie, jak plastik jest zrobiony, bo ja już myślę, wiecie, na przykład demony Korna, to może fajnie wyglądać.
Relatively recent kits that are still really nice stick around, but all of those new things we've seen are added to it as well. So it's a pretty big army.
Dobra, to zostały nam jeszcze, myślę, że 2 preview. Myślę, że pokażą nowego Killteama i pokażą to cokolwiek z Termosami i Gonokradami. To muszę wysłać ale komuś innemu.
And inside this box you will get these units. So the battle tome 2 units of Raptidons, the Slanmaid Priest, and a unit of Saurus. And then that will be followed swiftly afterwards by the release of all the rest of the Seraphon models that we've seen. So if you are a Seraphon fan, there is a really, really good few months ahead of you. So that's pretty cool.
It's exciting. I think we have a bunch of other things to cover for Age of Sigmar.
We were about halfway through Age of Sigmar.
Only halfway.
So there's loads of cool stuff for Age of Sigmar.
We talked about the fact that we have the Seraphon coming soon. What else do we have before we get to the Seraphon?
Let's have a look at the video and see what.
Chciałeś nieumarłych? Chicken? Chciałeś nieumarłych? Ale sorry, Ozjarchowie. To fajne. Mason w bow. No niestety. Ale to nie jest Ozjarch. A to jest pewnie Witch Hunter. Nie, Vampir. Fajny! Trochę za bestialski. Tylko po jednym bohaterze. Słabo. Fajny, ale... Fajny, ale chciałbym coś jeszcze. I może na przykład też w mniej bojowej formie, tak to nazwijmy.
I really gotta say, before we even talk about those, the marketing studio, the Warhammer studios that put together the vibe and the theme of these videos never gets enough credit. It's pretty amazing. I'm always entertained by it. But tell us about these models.
Yeah, so we've got 2 new heroes coming for Grand Alliance Death and 2 new battle tomes accompanying them. So we have the Soul-like Gravelords and a new vampire named Vampire Hero.
Bo faktycznie, moim zdaniem ci wampirzy Nieumarli zasługują na trochę więcej modeli teraz aktualnie.
Nie no,
kodeks. Do trzeciej edycji. Ozjarchowy tak średnio mi się podoba, trochę za... nie wiem. Ja lubię Ozjarchów, ale ten mi się nie podoba.
And effectively this is a mage who can construct units, and their particular speciality amongst the Mortisan
no cóż, no niestety, no, tak to wygląda z Warhammerem.
Most destructive units. So this is in game terms this is a.
Ale wiesz co, myślę, że do Rzeczy nie zmieni mechanicznie, bo oni są w miarę nową armią, oni już mają tą taką nowoczesną mechanikę Age of Sigmar.
So if you've gone for an elite or you've gone for kind of monster heavy Ossiarch force, this is probably the kind of hero you put into it to bolster it. Also just a really nice model, lots of kind of cool effects and stuff, so if you're looking for a painting project on a slightly smaller scale, that would lend itself pretty well to that. There is a new battle tome, it has a brand new cover, looks very cool, and that is cut across the Mortarch, who gets some tasty new rules in this battle tome as well.
O, nowe zasady ma, czyli
the
może...
current Bone Reaper's battle tome launched with the last edition of Age of Sigmar, and this brings it into the brand new edition, along with lots of all the new rules that other battle tomes recently have got.
No, zobaczymy, Chicken. No to tak szczerze pewnie za...
in the current edition.
Makes sense to me. Tell me about this.
2 miesiące. 2 miesiące.
Okay, well, we'll jump to the vampire in a second. Oh. So this is Ivya Volga, and she is a outcast of her house. She is a wandering, lone monster hunter, woodswoman. She wanders out into the wild places of the mortal realms. She finds monsters, she chops their heads off, and she drinks their blood. So the other vampires are sort of like not 100% on board with her, but she's still a vampire. She's still part of the family. When push comes to shove, and the armies march against them, she can still join the fight. She is accompanied by a swarm of bats, which she uses to kind of swamp enemy units and monsters to help her kind of even the odds in close combat. But what's quite fun about her,
myślałem, że jeszcze na klacie ma jakieś tam modyfikacje, nie, ja pewnie nogi bym zamienił je normalne ludzkie.
But it's a vampire, right? So it's a very dark Warhammery take on a very kind of
I mam pytanie.
European fairy tale sort of.
To są włosy, czy to jest czapka?
It makes sense. It's an interesting and fascinating thematic element. And it seems like both of these characters are helping drive those.
Czemu nasze wrażenie, że okładka jest stara?
Aesthetics and feels that they have.
Yeah, but both of them give you a sort of direction, I guess. So she's obviously got wolf elements to it.
Nie, czekam, że to są włosy. W moim headcanie to są włosy.
Gravelords again, actually got one of the last battle tomes of the last edition.
To trochę słabo, ale nie, ktoś też miał starą okładkę.
with the latest edition of Warhammer Age of
Nie,
Sigmar.
mogli
This
zrobić
battle
nową, no.
tome
Mogli
brings a bang-up
ten,
update.
czy
It also
Chicken,
incorporates other
ogarniasz
units
pewnie
we've
lore. Oni też mają
added
swojego
since
Mortarcha, co
the
nie?
battle tome was added, including things like the vampire unit we saw in the last edition.
To jest tak, że oni w
set
teorii
for
wszyscy
Warcry.
służą
So
pod...
it actually has quite a lot more to it than even the current Soulblight Grave
Dwóch
Lords
mają,
book.
bo mają pewnie tą
Soulblight
laskę
Grave Lords came out
z Egiptu
relatively
i
recently.
mają
They're a huge
Vlada,
hit.
tak?
One of the most popular armies now
No,
in
pod nagaszem,
Warhammer
dziękuję.
Age of Sigmar, and this book brings them bang up to date with loads of cool stuff that your army can now do.
Amazing.
But
We
that's
have
not,
more Age of
that's not
Sigmar?
it. You've got even more. We've got even more.
Feel
Jeszcze
like
więcej
no
dla
one
Age of
would have
Sigmar.
predicted that this was going to be an Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, I mean, they've been spoiled.
Jeszcze więcej dla Age of
Let off
Sigmar.
with a line, and now it's all about the mortal
Yeah.
realms.
Well, let's see what else we got.
I don't remember taking the coin Malleus. But here we are, trudging through the mud to bring Sigmar's light
Bardzo ładnie.
to the realms.
O, poważnie? Tylko oddział piechoty pokażą? A, to paskudne stworzenia.
So, Cities of Sigmar, that is the new infantry that is on its way for the Free Peoples, basically Sigmar's mortal
O
followers.
Jezu,
So,
ale
just to
słabo.
set your expectations a little bit, we are still a good few months away from the release of this army in full, but we wanted to kind of keep you updated as to where the project was getting to. We've kind of been following the Cities of Sigmar project as it develops, and now we've got the first kind of painted miniatures to show you. This is some warriors from the mortal infantry.
Wyglądają się packo, wyglądają bez sensu. Wyglądają idealnie.
You have to face flying sharks and huge uruks and vampires and monsters and pretty much.
So they're the human equivalent of.
Nie, to nie Underworld. To jest
well,
to właśnie
really.
Miasta
If
Sigmara.
you're looking for the absolute underdog of the mortal realms, this is this unit. They are given
Tak.
a rusty shield,
To są modele...
not matching weaponry.
Pomijając
Just about
pomijając
fit, and then
ten,
kind of booted
tą
out
tarczę.
en masse into the realms on great big crusades.
Kurde, gdyby nie fakt, że mam tą taką mini armię Korna, to bym taki debil zaczął zbierać.
The plucky underdogs of the mortal realms.
It's good to actually see some interesting models that are basically the opposite end
No
of
to
the
są,
spectrum.
jak rozumiem, Miasta Sigmara różne.
Often wild and crazy and monstrous element and aesthetic that you see a lot of
Even on the good guy side, right? Even in the forces of order.
Spokojnie, Chicken, to jest na razie tylko pokazać tylko 3 modele z oddziału,
oddziału.
Mam nadzieję, 30.
What this army basically does is it gives you the base level. It gives you like, what do the humans look like? What are they up to in the mortal realms? We'll have lots more stuff for the Cities of Sigmar over the coming weeks and months as we kind of approach the release. This is a piece of artwork from the upcoming battle tome, and what this does, which is quite cool, it gives you a sense of some of the sub-factions that are covered within the new battle tome.
The different sigils of the various cities.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the centre there, you've got Sigmar sigil, the 12-pointed star, but round the edge, you've got some symbols of cities that might be familiar if you're up to date on your current Age of Sigmar lore, and there's some ones that are brand new.
Yeah.
So give you a bit of a sense of different corners of the mortal realms that the battle tome and the armies will cover.
And you said Sigmar, the cities of Sigmar are still a little ways off. What can it look like between now and then?
So, in terms of the roadmap for Warhammer Age of Sigmar, we have Blades of Khorne and Head Knights for Slaanesh are available to pre-order just now, so they are days away from being in people's hands. Very soon after, we get 2 Death Battle Tomes, so the Ossiarch Bone Reapers and the Soulblight Gravelords are hot on their heels. And then we have Mystery Book 1 in summer. We're not going to tell you what that is just yet, but it's going to be very cool and exciting.
Okay, czyli kampania Sigmara.
Tune in for future previews to find out what that is. We also have Seraphon alongside their army box. They're going to land in summer, as will the latest General's Handbook. And then in autumn, we have Mystery Book 2, which I'm not going to tell you about today, but just very tantalizing, very mysterious.
The worst, Eddie.
And I am the worst.
Teasing us constantly.
True, it's all true. And then Cities of Sigmar will be with us before the end of the year, so we'll keep you up to date. We'll give you lots more.
Ale właśnie to mi się podoba w Miastach Sigmara, że w teorii właśnie tam mogę wstawić wszystko i no mówię, gdybym miał zaczynać teraz Sigmara i nie z Jarchami, to myślę, że właśnie Miasta Sigmara bym grał, mieszałbym taką dosłownie armią typowe fantazy, krasnale z ludźmi. Jeszcze Age of Sigmar? O, nie. O! O! Tego się nie spodziewałem. Tego się spodziewałem.
Not until we find our Iron King. Quick, search through the stasis chambers. Beastmen! Get to the escape pods.
Ale Beastmanów się nie spodziewałem. O, szczytpakiem. A to jest ten. Tylko wypraska ulepszeniowa. Tak, bucharkini. To jest dokładnie to, co przewidywałem. Fajny box. Teraz muszę znaleźć kogoś, kogo naciągnę na krasnoludnie Beastmanów, potrzebuję terenu.
Yeah, so this is Gallo Fall, which gives you a hint about what might be occurring in the narrative. This is the last installment in the current season of Killteam, which is the Into the Dark season where we're inside spaceships. And the reason this is the end of the season of this is that the Gallo Dark, the space Hulk we've been fighting over for the past year, is crashing. It is crashing into a planet. And this last...
Seems an appropriate Warhammer 40,000 sort of...
Aha, wiedziałem, że wszystko na jednym Space Hulku się dzieje.
That's kind of how it works. Welcome to Warhammer. And this Space Hulk is crashing into a planet, and this last installment is basically the last 5 minutes of a really cool action film where your kill teams have to get to the escape pods and get out of Dodge before the spaceship crashes into a planet and is obliterated.
To jest ostatni zestaw.
I tell you, the Votan team has all the hallmarks of a great action film in terms of how they're equipped as well. My favorite being probably
przez to, że są zwykłe tarcze. Szczerze, ci Beastmani tak słabi trochę.
So my favourite thing in the Leagues of Votan half is that there's one of the characters who's basically come with knuckle dusters to a space fight. So they know they're going to board a spaceship. They don't know what horrors could await them. They have access to the full range of the Leagues of Votan equipment. You know, railguns, rifles, all sorts of cool stuff. And this guy has decided he's going to go with the knuckle dusters.
I mean, they're like laser space.
They are like laser knuckle dusters, but even so.
I mean, when in doubt, punch it, right?
Absolutely. And up against them, we have the Felgor Ravagers, which are a Beastman warband. But let's take a look at some of these Leagues of Votan in a little bit more detail. So it's based on the current plastic kit for the kin, which is already a really flexible kit with loads of different head options and weapon options. And much like we've seen with lots of the other kill teams, we have a new sprue that expands the set and effectively allows you to make your models into specialists within kill team. I think it's one of the better upgrade kits because it adds onto a very recent kit, and the kit was already pretty good, right? The
chyba widzieliśmy.
Flexible kit.
And of course you get everything you need in the
watchbox też widzieliśmy.
So it's not as if you're missing one.
Zdradę jeszcze też jest nowa rzecz chyba.
But it really is a robust kit in terms of what it adds. Of course we've got those space laser knuckle dusters, which I'm affectionate.
It's probably got a better name than that. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not a lore writer here. We get that. And do we have the rest of the pictures there as well? Yeah, there's the minigun. That's the one I want. Plus, what better inside of a spaceship than sort of a jump pack?
Right?
Yeah, you got a jump pack too, which is pretty cool. I like the Ironkin, who's got the kind of the tech assistant, who's got a kind of data pad there, which is guiding them through the ship.
Yep, and a reminder that the Ironkin are no different in the eyes of the kin than any other member of their race.
They are an equal opportunities employer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Up against them, we have the Felgor Ravagers. So this is a really exciting kit. We haven't really seen Beastmen in Warhammer 40,000 properly for a long time. We saw a few of them pop up in Blackstone Fortress, but they were definitely like the side thing rather than the main event.
Za ten, o to też widzieliśmy.
I don't think so, though. There's a lot of chaos spikes on these guys. This is a brand new kit. It's very flexible, so much like lots of the other kill team kits we've seen, the bespoke kill team kits, you can build them in loads of different ways. There's different options for weapons and heads, and there's interchangeability between them. Each one is a specialist, so it's very definitely a combat-focused kill team, but you've got some slightly stealthy ones.
Może inaczej, to wygląda jak Beastmani w kosmosie, a nie wygląda jak Beastmani w 40, jeśli wiecie, o co mi chodzi.
Some that like charging and ramming stuff. So if you're looking for an aggressive kill team, it gives you some options, and much like lots of the other recent kill teams like the Recruit and the Eldar, the level of detail on those kits is really, really lovely.
Kurde, te akcesoria są fajne.
As well. You can see we've got one of the last expansions to the set. We've got a bunch of coward pods that you can jump into to get away from the trouble that's facing you. It's kind of an amazing set to finish off that sort of well-rounded collection. Into the
you get a little medical bay, which is quite cool. There's some stasis pods.
Again, another form of coward pod. I get it. This is a sort of a theme that's running on here, but Beastmen kind of have that vibe to them on occasion.
I think what I really like about it is it's got a feel of like a really old school Warhammer set, because you've basically got dwarves fighting beastmen, right?
Yeah.
But they've put them in space in a spaceship, and they've all got like laser guns and chainsaws and stuff.
And laser knuckle dusters.
And laser knuckle dusters. So it just feels really, really Warhammer at the same time as being completely science fiction.
And once again,
really
this whole Hulk that you've been fighting over for all these months is crashing.
It is crashing, yeah. So the climactic final installment to the current season of Killteam, 2 very, very fun Kill Teams to expand it. Just a really fun box.
I'm excited too, not to like give another shout out to Adepticonu, but right over there in the other room we've got literally like a 100+ player event, nothing but Into the Dark Terrain and everything else happening tomorrow and the next day.
Tutaj widać, że to są coś, co było kiedyś gwardią, coś, co funkcjonowało jako gwardia, tylko Beastmani, tylko chaos. To jest wciąż pancerz gwardii, która jest w tym zestawie, to są wciąż elementy tych pancerzy, jakieś tam resztki munduru. Oni też mieli kolczugi, bo tam jest, była gwardia chaosu w tym boksie, też miała kolczugi, więc to się trzyma sensu. To no nie, to są Beastmani, którym daliśmy chainswordy i pistole. Nie jestem fanem, ale tak, terenki bardzo fajne. Terenki bardzo fajne. Ja będę kupował ten zestaw dla terenów prawdopodobnie. Pytanie z kim, jak się naciągnę, żeby to jakoś podzielić. Co następne? Underworld. Ah! Czy teraz będzie... Fajne. Zestaw terenów. Fajne. Fajne. Okej, to nie. No tak. Fajne. Fajna, taki... O jest.
I'm super excited. It's a bunch of Siege models that looks like they really took the full brunt of what happens when you really followed Siege as far as it can go. Tell us about this.
So this is a brand new season of Warhammer Underworld.
Tak, niestety no.
A new Stormcast warband, which are a magic warband.
Szczerze, dawno nie było nowych Stormcastów do Underworldu.
On the other side is a Tzeentchian warband, which has a disciple of one of the Gaunt summoners of Tzeentch, the most powerful sorcerer, so somebody who's been tutored by one of Tzeentch's main followers, basically, and a gaggle of basically bits of wild magic that they've thrown together. So if you thought horrors were wild and unruly, these kind of take it to the next stage. So it's Weird Hollow. It is a magic-themed season for Warhammer Underworlds, and 2 really nice looking warbands. This being a new season, it is a really good place to jump into Warhammer Underworlds if you've not played it before. It comes with all the things you need to play. So you've got a board, you get all the dice you need, you get 4 decks, so you get a deck for each of the warbands. You also get 2 more Rivals decks.
The Rivals decks, so right out of the batch, they've got a sort of evergreen format decks as well that are baked into the box.
Yeah, so those decks work with any of your existing warbands from any season of Warhammer Underworlds you've ever had, and also work particularly well with the 2 warbands that come in this box. I think the stars of this box, though, I think are the miniatures as ever. Warhammer Underworlds has like a...
No tak, to na pewno, ale to jest Space Marine tak samo. No bo są wszędzie.
So if we have a look at a bit more detail at the units, so we'll start off with Philim's Pandemonium. So you've got your sorcerer at the center there, and they have summoned effectively elements of Tzeentch, wild magic manifested into the form of leaping lesser demons. So it's all about basically that your sorcerer is summoning stuff. That's very much the linchpin of the warband, and the unit is just full of gimmicks, right? So this is a really wild, unusual warband, not only in terms of how it looks, but also how it plays.
It's a really well-named warband as well, and it's hard for me to believe that something this weird could be as adorable as the sea creatures we've seen in previous editions as well. But this is one of those bands where I saw it and immediately had to have it on the miniatures alone. much less the cool
No,
rules.
takie bardzo ala symbol Zincha.
Yeah, I really like the central
Te sprawy.
character.
Mam nadzieję, że widać na streamie.
The Gaunt Summoners, I think, are really, really nice
Tak, widać
miniatures, and this has got all the kind of hallmarks
pod napisami niestety.
It's slightly differently presented. I think Zinch just gives you an opportunity as a painter to just do some really wild stuff. And I think in terms of, you know, left field, out there warbands, and just miniatures generally that don't come much more wild than this.
Ten tutaj? No ja, fajne, cool.
Makes a lot of interesting flowing robes, but also a lot of room.
They contrast up very nicely.
They do.
Yeah, they contrast nicely. On the other side of the box, we have Domitan's Storm Coven. So this is a magic-themed Storm host, Stormcast unit. They are equipped in Thunderstrike armor, so they fit in alongside the recent releases we had alongside things like Dominion. Just really, really nice Stormcast models. So each one is, you know, a great character model in their own right. Some really nice stuff going on with the bases. Really nice poses and proportions. Again, if you're looking for a painting project, Warhammer Underworld has outdone itself once more with
taking advantage of that theme that we've seen in Sigmara, really leverage that new model design capability we've seen of
spoko, faktycznie są samentalia. Cool.
Magical activities that are happening on the base. It's fascinating to see, and also, you know, can't wait to see in a game where someone throws a colonnade at someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about it before. It comes with lots of different decks you can use. So you've got the Rivals decks for each of the warbands, but you've got two
Naprawdę
other
ludzie 40 narzekają?
each of the warbands, or with any other warband in Warhammer Underworld. So
sobie
the box set itself is a really flexible gaming box that you can play on its own. You can incorporate it into other warbands you've got, into other seasons, or you can use it as the core of a brand new hobby, basically.
No wiem, znaczy wiadomo, że coś jeszcze pokażą, bo na preview był screenshot z Termosa, więc coś na pewno jeszcze będzie, coś z tym będzie. Myślę, że dużo więcej niż... Aż przecież Killteam był, nie był tylko Lion.
Local game group, or whether it's building into that scene to go to things like the World Championships and everything in between.
So Rivals, for those of you that don't know, Rivals for Underworlds is effectively pre-made decks. You can choose from either the deck that comes with your warband or from a selection of other generic decks, and it makes it very accessible because it means that you don't need to have bought loads and loads of different expansions.
No właśnie się potem poprawiłem. No dobra, jeszcze książka Lena jest, przepraszam.
It might come in one box alongside your warband, or you could just pick up a box like this, which comes with lots of different options, and all of a sudden all of your warbands can use a variety of different decks to play. So it's a really
Warhammer at the edge of your fingertips anytime.
Really nice box.
Or collect deep if you want to go for that Grand Clash and sort of World Championships.
Pretty cool.
No, jakoś tak nie jestem wykscytowany Leonem.
I think we're finished.
Yeah, are we done?
I think we're finished.
Is that it?
Yeah,
dobra, czyli tylko jeszcze jedna rzecz. Szkoda.
3 a.m. UK time to listen to this amazing preview. We got to see the Lion.
That was pretty cool.
We got to see Underworlds. We got to see a whole bunch of stuff for Age of Sigmar.
Hor, jacy śmieszni jesteśmy.
I'm pretty tired here. We did a live preview at Adepticonu, an amazing show. I think we've got nothing left to cover, right?
Oho.
There's the one thing.
Are we actually going to do that?
We're going to do it, yeah. Should we roll the video?
No.
Go on. Okay, don't be that guy. Come on, it's...
Werner, fine. Go ahead.
No to by był twist, jakby nie pokazali. Dobra, na to czekaliśmy niby. Oh, hey.
Victory. That is what the preachers cry from the spires of their temples.
O nie.
What commanders tell the soldiers in their service. The Indomitus crusade meets with triumph after triumph. Day by day we tear Imperium Nihilus from the despoiler's grip. And though we are beset on all sides, with each battle we drive back the mutant, the heretic, the alien. As I speak these words, our forces engage the remnants of Leviathan.
Remnants.
Reclaiming lost worlds, atoning for old shames. A crusade to cleanse the stars. Taking the fight to the enemy. We routed the Tyranids at Baal. We broke their high fleet. Soon, their foulness will be but a memory. That is what the preachers say. Will not save us. Lies will not protect us. But it is our hope that will damn us. Spies in the slums. Our people sing of victory. Victory as the galaxy burns. Victory as the Imperium rots around us. Victory as humanity rages against the dying of the light. Victory.
New edition of Warhammer.
Jednak.
Who knew?
Nobody called that, actually.
Nobody had
Mamy
any idea.
dziesiątkę.
So good. I gotta tell you, growing up my whole life as a fan, there's something about the grim, dark 41st millennium that when you watched, and it was beautiful and it was stunning, but when you watched Sister, Adepta Sororitas and the Ultramarines crushing some Necrons, there was a little bit of hope. There's a little bit of a glimmer.
That's all gone. That's all
gone. That was the grim, dark 41st millennium.
Dobry trailer. Dobry
That
trailer.
was not a happy video.
It's the first time I've seen it tonight, and I am
Dobra, ale
still
pokażcie
excited
cokolwiek.
at how not happy it was, actually.
But I think it just gives you like a sense of the absolute
Dużo widzieliśmy z tego traileru.
Not just like facing Tyranids, which is pretty horrific on the scale of things, but just generally, Warhammer 40,000 is an absolutely awful place to be alive, even for a Space Marine. Their survivability against certain races is measured in minutes and hours.
It is terrible, but it is a wonderful place to have a hobby. And why don't we let the people who actually wrote the game tell us a little bit more about
Absolutely.
that? Absolutely. And we'll tell you a lot first.
Warhammer 40,000 is the world's most popular tabletop miniatures game. Players command armies of genetically enhanced super soldiers, brutal monsters, powerful aliens, and destructive war machines.
I zwykłych ludzi.
Spectacular battles in the 41st millennium.
Our mantra with this new edition has been streamlining.
We've been listening to the community, and that's a large part of why we've decided to focus the game as much as possible.
How can we keep the tactical depth and richness that players love, but examine every rule in the game? Does this need to be here, or is there another way that we can achieve the same result?
To secure victory, you must understand your strengths and the strengths of your enemy.
We've fundamentally changed the datasheets from the ground up,
making them much more accessible and really focusing the rules onto the datasheet themselves. What the team's been able to do with this is really look at every unit in the game, make sure it has a really clear battlefield role and a thing for it to do, and then write the right rules for it.
Your datasheet rules all fit on a single card, and your army rules will fit on a single page.
One of the things we wanted to ensure was that everyone got to play 40k as soon as possible after the edition was launched. So to make that happen, all of the rules for everyone's armies via the datasheets and their army rules will be available for free.
From the darkness between the stars, a twisted mockery of evolution spawns fresh horrors.
It's a galaxy at war. This is the onset of what the Imperium will regard as the Fourth Tyrannic War. This is the largest Tyranid swarm ever recognized in the galaxy, emerging where no one's expected it. The Segmentum Pacificus.
To be a warrior of the Emperor in such times is to face an array of nightmares.
What we've managed to achieve with this edition is a game that players of Warhammer 40,000 will love for its tactical depth and choices, but is streamlined and plays much quicker.
The end result is faster, while still keeping all the flavour that you've come to love in Warhammer 40,000.
For players who've been with Warhammer 40,000 for the last 35 years, they've never seen anything like this before. We've never shown conflict at this scale.
Immersive and thrilling new gameplay. Discover a major new narrative in the Fourth Tyrannic War. The new edition of Warhammer 40,000 deploys this summer.
Wcześnie jak cholera.
So that's the Warhammer 40,000 studio had to say about some of the changes. It sounds very exciting.
It's very exciting. We'll talk about some of them in depth, in fact, in this very live stream, Eddie. But it's fascinating to me because there's a whole bunch to unpack about the new edition, not least of which is what's going on with the lore of the 41st millennium, as well as what's happening with the rules. What does this streamlined experience actually mean? Is it still the 40k we've come to know and love? As well as what do free rules mean? Because there's a lot more to that than what you might expect.
There's lots of lines there thrown away which have quite big implications.
Yeah, we'll take some time to get to you, but I feel like the one thing we're missing is, well, the reason we've all gotten into the hobby in the first place. Why don't we take a look at some miniatures?
Oh, no. To są stare termosy, czemu oni mnie pokazują?
So, Terminators are back. These are the first company of the Space Marines. Each one of those chapters has Terminators. They are the best of the Space Marines. And the new miniatures are absolutely what Terminators always were in your mind. Yep. These are indomitable, walking powerhouses of destruction, juggernauts of hate and fury unleashed upon the enemies of mankind.
And really brought up to speed with the development of the miniature range as a whole in the new edition, as well as the way that the miniatures themselves have been scaled over time. And I'm especially excited because as I was watching the chat during some of the videos earlier, I saw a bunch of people saying, I thought we were going to see new Terminator miniatures. And, well,
mamy nowych termosów, tylko nie mamy nowych termosów.
Szczerze?
Dobra, z drugiej strony co ja chcę od nich. To są termosy, kropka. I świetnie. Mają Crux Terminatus, mają... Generalnie po prostu...
They stand really well in the army. They stand taller than a Primaris Marine. One of the things that's worth saying about these Terminators is that these aren't necessarily Primaris Terminators. They're not necessarily Firstborn Terminators. Any Space Marine can earn the right to wear a suit of Terminator armor if they prove themselves to get promoted to the first company, if they prove themselves to be worthy of the mantle of wearing Terminator armor.
No dobra, ale Primaris są trochę więksi.
Veterans of the Firstborn veterans of the previous Tyrannic Wars. They could also be worn by Primaris veterans of the Indomitus Crusade or any other type of Space Marine veteran.
No właśnie, Horusowi też tak w sumie wyglądają w pełni jak starzy, tylko troszkę nowi.
Both the long-running demand for new Firstborn miniatures and for Primaris Terminators, because they are, when all is said and done, Terminators, and there could be anyone inside those.
The Terminator suits themselves are relics, right? So these are thousands of years old, and even Belisarius Cawl, after 10,000 years of fiddling around with all the tech he had, couldn't improve on the Terminator suit. So they still have their Crux Terminatus with those shards of the Emperor's own armor. You can actually look there at the Terminator in a bit more detail, and you can see that like every single element of it, all like the pipes and the cabling and the storm bolter and the helmet, they are recognizably the Terminators that you know and love, but all of it, the detail is so much crisper, the proportions and the pose are so much cooler. When you see these guys on the
widać, że są mniej jakby są wyżsi po prostu.
And obviously the Terminators come with all sorts of cool kit. Power Fist and Stormbolter are standard. The unit also obviously comes with an assault.
No mam nadzieję, że że będą wielkości chaosowych nowego, no wreszcie to będzie trochę smutek.
No, I can't wait to see more of them, but I feel like we need to see the other side of the spectrum as well. But first, I think it's good to highlight the difference in scale.
Fajnie wyglądają. Szczerze, jakby w porównaniu z tymi fajnie wyglądają. Te mniejsze głowy są bardzo fajne tutaj.
The old Terminators to be tiny necessarily, but really fits much more prominently within the range of miniatures that are available for the Space Marine faction. Kind of perfectly land in that new wave of miniatures we've seen over the last several years.
They look really good as well, facing off against something like the more recent Chaos Terminators, some of the kind of the bigger character models. So your something like a Primarch, maybe like Reboot Guilliman or the Lion or something like that, leading a squad of these guys. And obviously every chapter, all the main chapters we know about, have their own particular special brand of Terminator. So the Death Watch, the Archangels, the First Company veterans of the Ultramarines that have a particular beef against the Tyranids.
No, tak mam nadzieję, że nie. No są trochę za wysoce moim zdaniem względem chaosowych, co mnie zasmuca.
I couldn't agree more. And speaking of the beef that they have for Tyranids, we've shown you a new Space Marine miniature,
seems
but
only fair, doesn't it? Seems only fair.
The other side of the coin.
Nie wiem, te Gaunty wyglądały... Są nowe Gaunty. Faktycznie, ręce mają 4.
So, new
Termagants. So Termagants are the most numerous forces of the hive mind. They spawn them out in their millions and their billions across the planets they're seeking to consume. And the new Termagants are a glow-up, basically, of the Termagants we've seen
It's also the first model I ever painted.
Really?
Eddie, a little-known fact is that a Termagant was the first model I ever painted, and now I can't wait to paint millions more of them in the new wave.
So here we are, a closer look at them, and you can see that the level of detail on these is so crisp and so lovely. And these are very much the vanguard of a new wave of Tyranids. The Tyranid faction is going to get absolutely spoiled this year. If you're a Tyranid fan, there are so many new plastic kits. It's the most significant update to the Tyranid army we've ever done as a company.
I'm excited about it as a long-time Tyranid fan as well, because there's an enormous amount of work that's been done to make the Tyranid range feel both
faktycznie też oprowania na plecach jest znacznie wyraźniejsze. No i szpony tutaj, bo normalnie mają no bardzo fajnie. Szczerze? 10 na 10 jeśli chodzi o jakby o ulepszenie modeli, bo oni się też będą bardzo ładnie spasowywali ze starymi.
Sort of evolution of the range into exploring that sort of very foreign, very alien, very truly unknowable element of the Tyranidy with the new range. And I'm so excited to see the reaction.
Tylko mam nadzieję, że zestaw będzie domyślnie z wariantami broni. Też zmienili malowanie Behemota.
There are some returning favorites, it's fair to say. Some units that maybe haven't had the time in the limelight for a bit and are well deserving of a new plastic kit.
Hey, you don't have to scream it to me.
Yeah, and there are some things that we've never seen before. So one of the hallmarks of the Tyranids, I suppose, is their continuous adaptation and evolution in the face of challenges. And the Hive Fleet has definitely taken that on board with this latest Tyrannic invasion.
And we can see here in the scaling again that while the Termagant has definitely come a long way from its very tried and true, the trusty, rusty old plastic kit, it hasn't been outscaled in the development of it. It's still the same Termagant in terms of how it fits into the range as it used to be, just with that really fresh glow up, with that really.
I think it's the level of detail that really changes. So, like, I've got quite a lot of Termagants. I've got a Tyranid army. I've got about 30 Termagants painted up, I think. I'm
those
looking.
Are rookie numbers. You gotta
absolutely.
You gotta bump those up,
They were mostly just to come out of a Termagant, I think, with what I painted them up for. But they're so detailed. Like the level of crispness on that model, and you can see now that like contrast
po oddziale, cokolwiek to znaczy.
A wash or a dry brush or something like that is going to pick out all that detail really nicely. So even though it's really detailed, you can certainly paint those very quickly.
Nie, te też miały te drugie szpony, przepraszam.
There's a whole lot going on in the 41st millennium, isn't there, with the arrival of this new Tyranid range? What does that bode for us in terms of when we talk about the actual development of the universe itself, Eddie?
Yeah, so the new edition of Warhammer 40,000 is the new Tyrannic War. It's the fourth Tyrannic War against the Tyranids. So what we saw at the end of the Arcs of Omen with the Return of the Lion was the end of that story. So it has a really solid, conclusive narrative that kind of has a big culmination, a big showdown between the forces of the Angels of Death and the forces of Chaos. And then what we've done with the new edition is we've picked up the lens of what's going on in the galaxy. We've moved it to another part. In this instant, it's the western rim of the galaxy. So if
Western rim.
If you're familiar with your,
Tyranids typically come from.
They do. They come from the east. Usually, they come from the east. So if you're familiar with your Warhammer 40,000 lore, you'll know that generally speaking, the Tyranid invasions have all come from the galactic east, and they've kind of picked off Macragge.
Tak dowcip po Czechach, muszę się powstrzymywać.
It was always told as the beginning of this tendrils with the Hive Fleet in theory behind it.
Yes. So what we've got now with the Fourth Tyrannic War is the forces of the Leviathan. The Imperium has been fighting them for quite a long time, and they thought they kind of got their measure, right? They fought them at Baal.
Broke their fleets at Baal.
Yeah, they thought they might have, like, seen the peak of Leviathan halted, and that's absolutely not true. What we're seeing now is from the other side of the galaxy, this enormous, great tendril, this sweeping mass of Tyranids, the largest invasion we've seen yet, swooping in from the other side.
And it's still part of Leviathan.
Yeah, so Leviathan is kind of crushing both sides of the galaxy. The galaxy is literally in the jaws of Hive Fleet Leviathan.
This, to
and
me,
it's giving like a sense of the absolute scale and cosmic horror of the Tyranids, which everybody knew was huge, but this is like, we thought it was just coming from one direction, and actually the galaxy is completely surrounded. There are Tyranids coming from all sides.
It's a huge and stunning change for me in terms of reflecting sort of the scope, scale, nature, and sort of almost the terminal threat that Tyranid represent. It's not an unknowable, who knows how much more it is. They're so large that the entire galaxy is now surrounded effectively.
Absolutely, yeah. So just another apocalypse to add to the growing list for the Imperium.
Well, should we talk a little bit about the rules?
Let's talk rules, yeah.
Eddie. It's one of those things we're not sure. Anyone will wonder how much will we talk about the rule reveal right up with the cinematic, but we'll do that. We'll talk a little bit about what does new 40k bring from an actual playing of the game perspective. First one is we mentioned that the game has been streamlined, it's been simplified. The game is not simple. Let's remember this is still Warhammer 40,000. It's still the game that we all sort of know and love. And it has all of the hallmarks of Warhammer 40,000 that our community has grown up around, enjoying recreating battles in the battlefield. But from a simplification perspective, there's been an enormous amount of work done to make the game less dense, to make redundancy and minor rules spread across numerous publications less complicated, and to streamline everything into sort of, we'll talk about it a little bit as we go through a couple of these next elements of the game. A good example is instead of having, let me think of it, if you were to run a Space Marine detachment today, Space Marines Army, you might have a book that has several pages of stratagems, you have several pages of psychic powers, you have warlord traits, you have relics, you have all these rules and layers of rules. And then if you want them to be,
quite a lot to learn,
it's
right?
a lot. And if you want to make them Ultramarines and add that on top, then you've got more pages of rules and stratagems and so on and so forth. What we didn't want to do is get rid of the value of things like stratagems and enhancements to your warlord or to some of your key character units. But they've been simplified down so that when you're playing, you'll have one full page spread open. And on that one full page spread, you'll have a series of stratagems, about 6 on average per army, as well as a series of upgrades to your warlord or to your relics, and a sub-faction rule, effectively, to whatever your army may be. And if you choose to play a different grouping, let's say you go from Ultramarines to Ultramarines First Company, instead of adding a whole other book to the whole experience, you'll take that one-page spread of rules and replace it with a different one, so that you're always working with a really tight, streamlined set of rules, but still the same depth that you have today within your army, different stratagems, different abilities. And then a number of different stratagems, rules, and other things have been taken and put back onto the datasheet to really bring the units to the forefront of the game as an experience again. So as opposed to putting down your units and then playing a lot of the game, as it were, from the front of the book, there's a greater emphasis for many of those rules moving into the datasheets and moving into the overall game experience. We also have key changes to phases. They've been streamlined. We have the morale phase has been moved into the command phase and rejiggered entirely with something called Battle Shock, which we may talk about a little bit more here. The psychic phase has been broken down into the actual data sheets of the rules and abilities.
So there's not a psychic phase
there
anymore.
There isn't an actual psychic phase anymore in the game. Instead, psychic abilities are baked into the units themselves. They still work in some ways evocative of how psychic powers work today, but it's not an entire phase that applies in very different ways to different armies.
So, for example, a librarian might have Smite, which would be a ranged shooting attack with a psychic ability.
Yes, with reflections of things like the hazardous nature of using it at a very high level, with the potential to inflict mortal wounds and other things, but still focused as basically a shooting attack. Whereas some of the psychic powers that might buff a unit or debuff a unit are more baked into an ability within the data sheet as opposed to an entire phase oriented around the functionality. And it better reflects the sort of strengths and weaknesses of different psychers. Someone like a Primaris Psyker within the Astral Meltarum might not be as reliable getting off their abilities as Magnus the Red, who's probably not going to fail them.
Yeah, so Magnus the Red has a ranged psychic attack, but it's like a really good ranged psychic attack.
Absolutely, and
as well as a range of other psychic abilities.
As well, as opposed to just a generic psychic ability that every other Psyker has.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit about morale and battle shock there. I think obviously we'll dive into all of these rules in a lot more detail on the Warhammer community site over the coming weeks and months. But I think one of the things that I really like about the new edition and the changes is that you don't lose models in morale anymore. You don't have you don't fail a morale tech and actually just take units off. It just changes the way that unit interacts with the game.
It does. It works much more like a unit that's been broken up and banged up within a very fast-paced, sort of almost modern firefight, and that those units might not interact as well with rules and with grabbing objectives and other things as they normally would. Additionally, it has much more relevance throughout the game, whereas today you might kill off most of the models in a unit. They barely pass the morale test. A couple models survive, and they go hide in a corner on an objective all game, and they're basically fine from then on out, even though most of their units have been devastated. Battle Shock will have less of an impact on models disappearing from the board and more of an impact on testing their metals.
How reliable is that unit now in the battlefield?
Once a unit has been damaged to a certain degree, it may become less reliable on a regular basis, depending upon how they hold themselves together in the face of the ongoing.
No wiem, ale zobaczymy.
Should we talk about stratagems a little bit?
There's definitely fewer stratagems to remember. There's many more stratagems that are core stratagems that you'll commonly see in gameplay. Whereas whenever you play a faction, you basically always have 6 stratagems available.
Yeah.
And if you decide to play a different variation of that faction, you'll take those 6 stratagems away and replace them with 6 new ones that are for that variation, i.e. Ultramarines versus Imperial Fists or something similar to that effect.
So you have a very common, a list of common stratagems that everyone can use, and that's a little bit bigger than it is now. And then you have a much smaller list of ones that are specific to the faction.
Yep, and they're much more focused on really impactful stratagems you'll want to use on a regular basis. There's also fewer command points in the game by a significant margin, and so there's much more of a focus on using the right stratagem at the right time, rather than dumping all of your command points on turn 1 into a series of combos that makes it feel like you're playing against, again, the front of the book as opposed to the armies and the data sheets that are on the tabletop. Also, let's be very clear. We've re-indexed the game. All of the index rules are free, and are free on day 1, as are all of the core rules to play the game.
So that means on the first day of the new edition, if I've got an Orc army, which I do, I can get my core rules,
oczywiście darmowe,
all my data sheets for my
w
Orc,
naszej płatnej aplikacji.
And all your army rules as well. Now there's nothing in particular that's hidden. All of them are free and available on day 1 to play with, and the points are going digital and free as well on day 1.
Świetnie.
Nice.
So there's also the ability to purchase indexes, because if you want to have them, you can have actual physical datasheet cards.
So those are a little bit like the War Scroll cards in Warhammer
Age of Sigmar.
All of the rules are kind of compacted onto a single card.
Yep, and you no longer necessarily need to bring all of them with you if your army only uses 10 datasheets instead of the 180 you have in Space Marine or many of these days. You only need to bring those datasheets with you instead of lugging the whole book, because again, you just have that one open page or a couple of data cards of your actual army rules and stratagems, and then your individual data sheets.
So that was a common thing, wasn't it? That we were being told from the community was like, they like the Warhammer 40,000 as a game, but there's a lot of rules to carry around, right? There's rules bloat in terms of the things you have to remember, but also the amount of books that you need to take with you when you play a game, and you've got less things to remember, less things to know about your opponent's army, but the variety of it in terms of the choices you have.
And army building itself, as we just saw back there, I don't know if we'll go back to that one image we had just before this one. Army building itself
Nie podoba mi się to once per turn, czy once per game?
It is a much more accessible thing to get into. And we've done a lot of interesting things with the rules to make
Once
it
per
more
turn, to
innovative and more immersive to build a diverse
Movement,
army as opposed to
toughness,
just taking
safe,
the best units,
woundy,
or on paper the best units. And the way it's been simplified is you take a character, your warlord, you take up to 3 of any data sheet, or up to 6 of any basically troop or dedicated transport data sheet, and that's it. And so you need to have a warlord, and then you take up to 3 of most units. Additionally, there's been a great deal of work in putting things like what used to be individual unit stratagems and other abilities into the datasheet itself, and there's a variety of rules that are tailored to work with this type of army building. A good example being that a Space Marine captain might have a really powerful ability, but only one model per turn can use that ability, and so taking a second or third one isn't necessarily a value add. And there's many different units that, instead of there being a stratagem where after your unit shoots and targets a unit, now your other units get a benefit against it, there might be a key unit that provides that buffer benefit to your army. And so working in a combined arms way and leveraging different data sheets into your army in an innovative way is oftentimes, by design, much more impactful and useful and interesting than simply taking 3 of one thing and 3 of the other. So army building has been simplified, but the depth and interest in actually building a diverse force has been a major focus for how the data sheets have been built and how the army rules have been designed.
So every unit basically has got their thing. Like they've got the thing that they bring to your army. So
absolutely,
in a way that at the moment you might be relying on stratagems or something to do a particular niche or to fill a particular need. A lot of the time, the unit and the data sheet will allow you to do that. So that's why you take that particular unit.
Much greater focus on your army doing the work of being an army as opposed to how can I take the most.
No ciekawe, czy kto zostanie do książki. Tyranidy, Beastmani.
So I think we had an example data sheet that might be worth talking through some of the things because it looks quite a lot different from the data sheets we have at the moment.
Data sheets are heavily different, and with the decision to index, there's also the opportunity to revamp the way a data sheet looks and is designed.
Siłam w broni, nawet w mele. Ma to sens.
They have an ability that focuses on how the unit behaves and is very thematically tied to them.
I guess one of the things before we get too into it is that the data sheet does look quite different, but actually the effect in terms of what it does in the game is not a million miles away from the way that Warhammer 40,000 works today. So
no, it's going to seem very familiar. It's not a move to something like Age of Sigmar where every unit hits or wounds on a fixed number or something like that.
Ataków nie ma.
Instead, it's still very similar to what you'll remember.
No, bardzo Age of Sigmarowe.
40,000 today. But the ranged weapons and melee weapons and things like that have been moved into their own profile. You'll notice that attacks and ballistic skill and weapon skill and strength.
Yeah, they still exist. They're just attached to the weapon.
They're moved into
the weapon.
That allows us to do a wide variety of things with the way that the units are designed, such as something like chainswords or a Space Marine Captain's Power Fist versus a Space Marine Sergeant's Power Fist. Those things can all be somewhat different, and they can reflect the way the individual models work rather than being hard tied to the individual model's attacks or strength characteristics.
So we've got a few questions in the chat about OC.
OC.
Talk a bit about that.
Objective control. So OC effectively establishes the value that each model in a unit has if it is within range of an objective marker. So a unit of 10, now things like objective secured as a rule, those are gone. Instead, it's reflected with the individual units. Each model may have a different objective control characteristic. So each termagant is worth effectively 2 points if it's within range of an objective. Whereas something that may be bigger or more robust but isn't really focused on grabbing objectives may only have an OC value of 1.
But it also means things like knights, which
have a much higher
particularly struggled with objective control, can actually now count as lots of... the OC could be quite high, and they could... one grot doesn't beat one knight sort of thing.
It's definitely an improvement in the way we design models for function because, again, when you look at things like what does optimal mean, as some of the folks who play the game at some levels focus on, instead you can go, well, this unit may not have the same damage output as another unit, but it's much, much better.
Ja osobiście nie jestem fanem. Ja bardzo lubiłem Adepticonu na piechocie, ale taki jako pewien film piechoty. A zgaduję, że podstawowa piechota będzie miała więcej tego, na przykład genokult może mieć genokrady, może mieć 1, albo zwykły to Termosy mogą mieć 1, ale intercesorzy mogą mieć 2.
There's a whole bunch of work done to look at their lore, at their IP, and make sure that the abilities actually reflected that. In the case of the scuttling termagants that are very sneaky, can tend to be difficult to pin down. When you get within 9 inches of a unit, the unit gets to move in reaction.
So that's very reactive compared to the current edition.
And there's a ton of addition of reactive abilities and reactive stratagems and reactive data sheet abilities into the game.
Świetnie, bo to w teorii, jak podejdą będzie więcej cali, to nie mogą podejść D6.
So there's less phases, and there is a greater...
To mi się podoba. O, na przykład właśnie, tak jak mówisz, Chicken, że Rhino może mieć na przykład 0. No, mam nadzieję, że to nie jest, że może być 0.
A couple of people noticing slight differences in the stats, so I think one of the things worth saying is that because this is a re-indexing of the game,
o, BS też jest teraz na broni.
Things like durability and strength and how common AP is across the entire game.
There are two major changes that are worth focusing on. That one, in general, lethality is down. It doesn't mean that it's down to a degree that might remind someone of editions many moons ago.
You still don't want to stand out in the open in front of a
You're probably going to get shot in the open if you do stand in the open. But the game is going to be a little bit less lethal than it is today. Cover is going to work a little bit differently. We're going to talk about
AP
all
is
of this
a little bit rarer.
AP is a little bit lower on average. And then there's also a stratification of strength and toughness when it comes to larger monsters and vehicles. Today is very much the case where you tend to see very few things that are different from, like, for instance, toughness 7.
Yeah, you cap out at about 8, don't you? It's very, very rare to have anything that's higher than 8.
So if your army has a large amount of access to strength 8 weaponry, strength 7 weaponry, it really is able to wound almost anything in the game pretty reliably, and that's no longer going to be the case. I'm not going to spoil anything for you, Eddie, but there definitely is a much, much higher level of toughness.
Well, there's vehicles that have toughness higher than 10.
Well, there's vehicles that have toughness higher than 11.
Well, there you go.
And what that does is it creates a much better stratification of the game so that having dedicated role units to deal with different threats is much more of a real component, as opposed to, gosh, I sure have a lot of strength 8 in this army. I guess I wound everything on 3s or better. And so that kind of brings back not quite the same as armor values back in the day. where certain things couldn't hurt anything, but a much more robust stratification.
Yeah,
of the
so
different
you
types
couldn't,
of
for example, I'm just going to invest heavily in plasma, and that's going to solve the game for me because I've got all the 7 and 8 strength I need.
Yep, because while toughness went up on many units, in many cases strength did not go up on many weapons. So a plasma gun has not changed materially in its strength. Its AP might have even changed downward, whereas the units that used to be wounded on 3s by a supercharged plasma gun now may only be wounded on a 5 by them.
W sumie to jest...
Substantial changes.
Szczerze nie wiem, czy...
Data sheets you're going to see many more of them in the time to come. Eddie, I know we won't talk too much about it so that you can talk all about it.
Yeah, so we will cover loads and loads of the rules over on the community site in the coming weeks and months.
A couple of other things are worth talking about.
Boarding actions and boarding patrols from the latest Arcs of Omen books. They are compatible with the new edition of Warhammer 40,000. So if you've been collecting yourself a little 500-point combat patrols of infantry to go diving into Space Hulks, they will absolutely still be able to do that in the new edition. So you can take all those recently constructed armies with you as we go. So that'll be really
all of the boarding patrol rules that are in the Arcs of Omen books are fully compatible. They were designed to be that way so that if you've been investing in those books and the amazing story they've told and the rules themselves, none of those are invalidated by the release of the new edition. They haven't been taken away. It's not a short-term use. They'll be usable well into the future.
Yeah, which is really cool. And then there is another interesting way to play Warhammer 40,000. So Combat Patrol is a new thing in Warhammer 40,000, a brand new way to play the game. And the way that this works is different from the way Combat Patrol works today. The way it works is that you pitch Combat Patrols against each other. So the way you choose your army is you pick up any of the Combat Patrol boxes that we make, and that is your force. You can build it however you want out of that box, and it is balanced and pitched against other Combat Patrols in a similar way that you might play something like Killteam, where you have a preset list of units. The rules for Combat Patrol are a little bit different from Warhammer 40,000, so maybe slightly simpler in places. There might be slightly less access to some of the choice, but fundamentally you are playing Warhammer 40,000 at a very accessible level. One of them is that if you want to start a new army, it gives you a very, very accessible way to try them out, basically. So you don't need to put yourself together 2,000 points worth of models before you can start rolling dice and have a satisfying game. You can play Combat Patrol and have a really good, fun game balanced against lots of other armies. And the other thing is that if you like to dip your toe into lots of different forces, so you're a kind of hobby butterfly, I suppose, and you're like, oh, I like playing with Chaos, but I also like my Orcs, and I quite like those new Eldar models that came out, and I like a bit of this. Then you can jump between lots of armies, again, without needing to necessarily
Dokładnie, znaczy nawet jakiś... No dobra, okej, może i balans zrobią, że kustosze będą słabi, ale generalnie kustosze kontra... No Gwardię weźmy. Przemysł oddziały piechoty Sentinel i ciężkie działo.
Because Combat Patrol is meant to be both streamlined and easy to play and also accessible to newer players. You might have a unit that has 2 data sheet abilities, A and B, and they are relatively simple in the Combat Patrol. When it moves up to the full size of 40k, that same data sheet is going to have basically the same abilities, but maybe a little bit more robust or more broad sweeping for the full size game. It's not going to be completely different abilities, and so Combat Patrol is going to very easily navigate into full size 40k, but it's built and being actively balanced pretty aggressively every day by the studio, so that whatever Combat Patrol you want, and the rules for it are free as well, and will Evergreen be free. You buy that Combat Patrol, it is built to be played against all of the other Combat Patrols the way it is out of the box.
It's a really, really nice new way of playing 40k. We've got one question that's popping up a lot in the chat I just wanted to answer. There's some questions there about Forge World rules. Forge World models for Warhammer 40,000 will also get free data sheets that you can use in the new edition. So if you've got your Gargantuan Squigoth, it's a great kit. Why would you not, right?
Of course Eddie brings up the Gargantuan Squigoth. It's one of the things we talk about all the time.
You can still use it.
So all Forge World rules will be taken care of. They'll be free, of course, just like all the index rules are on day one. It's worth mentioning we have a new app.
Yep.
It works 100%, which is one of the important things we're really excited about, is a fully functioning army builder. All of the rules available in it again, all of the points free and digital on day one.
Yep.
And so we're fairly excited about all of these new things that are coming to fore that should make the game more accessible and more easily gotten into than ever before. If you play today, you will be able to play fully with no caveats or asterisks on day one of the new edition.
One of the questions that's popped up quite a lot I just wanted to address is Crusade. So Crusade is absolutely, definitely still a part of Warhammer 40,000.
Very big part of it.
There will be some ways to, if you've been crusading for the past 3 years and you've had a good time, you've taken your troops through all sorts of battlefields to the distant corners of the galaxy, there will be some ways to port that army into the new edition, which is pretty cool. There will also be some brand new expansions for Crusade, so you know, the new edition starts with the 4th Tyrannic War. That might give you a sense of where some
bit of a hint
where some of the first Crusade expansions might go. But if you enjoy Crusade, and lots of people do, there is still definitely ways to engage with that in the new edition.
It's fair to say that Crusade was one of the big hits of the previous edition, and I don't think it's going anywhere. We're doubling down on it on all fronts, really, whether it's in our event scene with things like the Grand Narrative, whether it's in organized plays, we start to connect more of a narrative element to that, all sort of globally, or whether it's, of course, in the revitalization and release of effectively Crusade 2.0. But we don't want to spoil everything on just the first preview. We'll give Eddie and his team all the time in the world to share all this excitement over the coming weeks to come.
Yeah, so new edition of Warhammer 40,000 will be coming in summer. We have a few weeks and months yet before we get there, so keep checking out warhammercommunity.com. You can sign up to a newsletter to find out all the news as it happens. We've got loads of stuff to show you, including new miniatures. We'll talk about all the new rules we've mentioned in loads more detail, all the new lore, everything about it. Follow along on warhammercommunity.com, and keep up to date.
We could talk your ear off all night long. Thank you for getting up so early or so late, depending upon your personal time zone, to share this time with us, to share the excitement with us. We've actually done it twice now, once live for Adepticonu and once live for all of you. It's been a pleasure. Eddie, thanks for having me. Did you have a favorite?
Obviously, the new Warhammer 40,000 is pretty cool. Did you have like a favorite thing in the other?
I was a big fan of the Lion.
It's pretty cool.
It's always cool to see when a primer comes up. But honestly, I'm going to tell you that the Seraphon, I mean, they scratch an itch for me that connects to everything from, you know, classic movies of yore to owning every single dinosaur book growing up. And it's one of the armies that I'm actually actively collecting and painting now. So I can't pick just one thing. Suffice to say, it's an exciting summer and year to come for Warhammer.
Yeah, it's going to be really good times ahead for every single game system, basically, is getting treats in the next few months.
Thanks, all. We won't keep you up any longer. You can hear more in the future. Eddie, thanks for having me.
No problem. See you guys.
Okej, musiałem się pożegnać. Wiadomość na koniec. No dobra, to tyle jeśli chodzi o nową edycję. Przejdźmy na chwilkę teraz jeszcze przez wszystko od początku do końca. Otwórzmy sobie, myślę, że chyba jak to otworzę, to będzie. Nie, tutaj nie będzie. O, może to. Też nie, Jezu, gdzie jest jakiś zbiorczy artykuł? Wiesz, po prostu za Lionem, dokładnie. Tak, to jest zbiorczy? Nie, nie jest zbiorczy, czyli muszę każdy osobno otwierać. No dobra, sobie pootwieraj. O, tego nie pokazali! A nie, pokazali, sorry, to jest przecież ta kwonia. Dobra, więc przejdźmy sobie. Zobaczmy to jeszcze raz. O, to chyba tych niektórych rzeczy nie wyświetlili tam. Dobra. Jest tak, pokazałem nowego Liona. Jest ciekawy, jestem pewien, że Mikołaj się wypowie na jego temat. Mówię, gdyby miał trochę więcej włosów na czole, bardzo ładny, na szczęście zabrał sobą kaptur, więc jest to schowane. No i oczywiście książka, bardzo ładny Dorn. Jestem pewien, że będą konwersje. Tylko za dużo rzeczy trzeba będzie pozmieniać, ale z jego głowa na ciało Gullimana. O, idealne. Gotowe. Mam tam oczywiście książkę, pojedynek z Gronem, to zasady widzieliśmy. Zasady do nich. Kwonia. Żadnego nowego plastiku, tylko preview. No niby, jasne, a to już hardkorowe. Nowy Killteam. Gallowfall. Hardkini kontra Beastmani. Tutaj właśnie widać to, co narzekałem wcześniej. No, dobra, tutaj trochę lepiej wygląda, ale weźmy sobie tego. Fantazy. Fantazy. Nie fantazy. Fantazy. Nie fantazy. Sorry, no, starzy byli lepsi. O, tu, o. O, dokładnie. Wszyscy powinni wyglądać tak, minus to powinno być jakimś zwykłym pancerzem. No, 3 ręce. To całkiem okej jest. A tu już kompletnie. Tylko granat go odróżnia. Więc granaty ja mogę sobie sam dokleić do Beastmana. No tutaj fajny. Ta roboręka. No i cyberoko. To fajne. No, to są ładne modele. O, to widzieliśmy kiedyś. To są ładne modele. No tylko, że... No sorry, skąd on wziął ten garnek? No, przez chwilę myślałem, że mam zakłócenia na łączach. No. No cóż, tereny oczywiście bardzo fajne. No właśnie, no, mówię, nie podoba mi się. Tutaj oczywiście nowi serafonii w różnych malowaniach, dowódca, jaszczurki, serafony box, serafony książka, nowe wampiry, nowi Nieumarli, Miasta Sigmara, pierwsze 3 jednostki, jaki Goofy, jaka kopitka, śmieszne. Mamy to, nowy Underworld, o, a znowu, bardzo podoba mi się te wkładanie tych symboli z Incha, tam gdzie nie powinno. No tutaj trochę większe zbliżenie te modele. No wiem. Psychomrejczek podawy, tak. Takich mówię. To przez niego zacznę ich zbierać, to przez niego. No mówię, te horrory bardzo fajne. Takiego rodzaju. No i oczywiście zapowiedź. Czy to jest link do strony? Dobra, czyli nie działa. Cinematic trailer, o tutaj mamy. To jest zwykły Swarmlord. Tak na oko. Art termosów. Termosy są. To jest stare? Nie, to jest właśnie Swarmlord, bo ma trochę inne miecze. Chyba. Ciężko zobaczyć. Swarmlord. Tak, to jest stary model, kto może znowu odtworzą. W teorii to jest nowy, bo stary Hive Tyrant ma inne nogi, gdy jest ze skrzydłami. Więc to jest w teorii nie jest dobra reprezentacja plastiku, więc myślę, że wyjdzie nowy. No, pewnie wyjdzie nowy box. Te miecze, tak ciężko zobaczyć. Gdzieś są... tak? Tak? To jest stare? Spoko. No akurat nie jestem pewien. Ale to też takie te terenki tak nowo wyglądają, no ale to może być z jakiegoś innego zestawu. Tutaj tał. Bardzo, bardzo słaby Photoshop oczywiście. No i tu, tak powiedziałem, termoganty. Trochę więcej tego. No to już widzieliśmy, no i Beastmani, Termosy, nowe modele. No ja wiem, dobra. I to wszystko. Dobra, także. Chicken, bardzo dziękuję za twoją obecność na żywo. Wszystkich oglądających później w jednej albo w drugiej formie pozdrawiam. Na pewno będziemy to na podcaście omawiać jutro. Biorąc wszystko pod uwagę. A dobra, po prostu podglądu nie mam na to. Poczekaj. O, dobrze. Już. No. No nic, zapowiada się ok. Szczerze, trochę z lepszą nadzieją patrzę na nową edycję. Zobaczymy. No, zgodnie z przeciekami zasady są za darmo, więc to jest ogromny plus. To jest szczerze, akurat płatność zasad w tym momencie jest moim zdaniem dużą barierą. Aplikacja minimalnie może oznaczać również tłumaczenie, w co raczej wątpię, ale minimalna szansa jest. No, zobaczymy, co z tego wyjdzie. Godzina jest jaka jest. Zobaczymy, co ja zrobię zresztą dnia. Myślę, że się zdrzemnę na chwilę. No bo jutro jednak jutro też dzień rzeczy do zrobienia. Także Chicken jeszcze raz pozdrawiam, dziękuję i słyszymy się następnym razem.